Aged care workers have to get by on an income of around $50,000 and many earn much less. They have insecure roles and often no paid annual leave. They don't get superannuation or sick pay, let alone severance pay, long service leave and the like. The recent revelations from Australia Post and ASIC about Cartier watch bonuses and $120,000 tax minimisation bills highlight the vast chasm between the different types of workers in Australia. My question is, how much of these exorbitant income executives earn in salaries and bonuses is deserved, and how much is simply greed or the most they can get away with?
Dani?
I mean, I would love a Cartier watch. Still waiting for my Cartier watch. I mean...
But is it greed? Is that what this is about or something else?
It is. I mean, and it's insensitive. As I say, I'll say it again. I mean, people in this, in the global pandemic and in, the midst of a recession, they have lost lives. They have lost a lot of money. They have lost their jobs, and we've got Christmas around the corner and they're trying to figure out the best way in which they're going to manage their finances. And what we see here with that kind of expenditure is absolute greed and, it's distrust. You're dealing with public funds and look at the extravagant gifts that are being, flippantly, put out there and gifted. So,
Ken Henry, why do you think there is so much outrage about these watches? The sum total of which I think was $20,000 or so.
Yeah. And
yet the comparative outrage around the purchase of land near the Badgerys Creek Airport, $30 million the Commonwealth spent of taxpayers' money on land that was worth $3 million. Can you explain why the public reacts to one with so much more outrage than the other?
Well, I think it's in the question. I think it's in the question, People understand the circumstances in which they live. They understand how they're treated as an employee. And they simply cannot understand how somebody in a different place with a different title can be treated in a completely different way, right? It's the juxtaposition of those two things that they find really difficult to understand. Actually, it's impossible to understand, I think. But I would say that, and I would encourage people, because that question really has two parts. I would encourage people to focus on the first part, which is why the hell are people in aged care paid so badly? That's the real question here, I think. A few Cartier watches, of course, it's kind of salacious and it's, it kind of makes for good media. But the really important question here is why we pay aged care workers so badly. That's the important question.
Yeah, I think that's...
I just want to bring in Dave Sharma, though, on the Cartier watches. We all saw the visceral reaction from the Prime Minister and your government to the news about these watches, and we can compare that to the response around the Leppington Triangle, property purchase, the Sports Rorts affair. There's obviously a range of other incidents that have occurred. Why did that provoke such a reaction from your government while these other incidents didn't?
Well, look, I'd say, Hamish, I think it offended the Cartier watches issue. It offended everyone's sensibilities and sense of solidarity through this crisis, and particularly since it's a public corporation, it's taxpayer owned and or we're the largest shareholder anyway. And people thought, it was absolutely the wrong signal to be sending at a time when a lot of people are going through a lot of difficult times. I distinguish it here, though. I mean, that was clearly a decision taken by the leadership of Australia Post to do this. The Leppington Triangle issue, I mean, that was not a decision that came to a minister. The Australian National Audit Office has made adverse findings. It's being investigated and the AFP is investigating. So let's find a culprit before we point the finger in that instance.
But what about ministerial responsibility for things like that?
Well, I don't think there's any suggestion that the minister responsible took that decision. It was taken by bureaucrats within the department. The minister's responsibility is to get to the bottom of it.
That is not how ministerial responsibility works in our system of government.
Well, it is how it works today.
It's not how it's supposed to work.
According to you, Simon, yes.
No, the convention... No, not according to me. The well-understood conventions of ministerial responsibility is that the only way that you can hold the executive who exercises power to account is by a minister being accountable to the parliament who represent the people. Yeah. And it requires a very difficult fiction to be put in place, which is that ministers take responsibility even if they may not personally have directed a certain action or known of it. Because if they don't, then there's no way our system works, Dave. And
But
if
Simon,
you
an
volunteer
investigation into this is still
to be a
ongoing.
minister,
An investigation into this is still ongoing, and you're already assuming what the findings are.
No, I'm challenging your claim
that's
that's
contrary
not
to due process.
No, I'm challenging your claim,
It is.
Dave, that ministerial responsibility doesn't apply in the way that I said it does. Now, I'm happy for due process, but ultimately the minister is responsible.
We haven't looked at the findings there yet.
When I joined the public service, the doctrine of ministerial responsibility was in place. Now, this is 1984, it's a hell of a long time ago, but the doctrine of ministerial responsibility was in place. And what it meant was that if there was significant maladministration in a department or agency that was within the portfolio of the minister, or there was a really bad policy and the policy went shonky, the minister stood down. That was what the doctrine of ministerial responsibility meant. And it disappeared, I would say, at some stage in the Howard government years, just disappeared. These days, I'm not sure. I'd actually be interested in Tanya and Dave's view on this, but is it even the case today that if a minister misleads the House, that the minister feels obliged to correct the record as soon as is humanly possible, else the minister has to resign?
Well, I think it really depends on the minister, doesn't it? We've had examples in recent times. We're talking about the Leppington Triangle of land now, but we've had sports rorts, we've had water buyback rorts, we've had the grassland scandal, we've had travel rorts, we've had alleged branch stacking with taxpayer funds, we've had a bunch of things. We had Angus Taylor saying that the document that he relied on to make claims about the City of Sydney Council was not forged. He said that in the Parliament more than once. And then, I mean, where did it come from? Seriously, it beggars belief that he was telling the truth in the Parliament when he said that. So obviously there are some ministers who don't feel that misleading the Parliament is a sacking offence. And what's really terrible about this is that the Prime Minister should be upholding these standards. He should be insisting that these standards are upheld, and he doesn't. He puts some people on the backbench for a spell, like Stuart Robert or Susan Ley, when they get in trouble, and then they just get recycled in the next ministerial reshuffle. The standards have been declining for years. That's why we need a National Integrity Commission.